forgot to respond.
Well, good evening, friends and neighbors. This is a time and place set for a meeting of the Stayton City Council. It is the 2nd of March. It's 7 o'clock by trusty Timex, and it's time to go to work. So I'm going to call the meeting to order, and would all those of a like mind please join me in a flag salute. I got to stand up. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Are there any additions to the agenda this evening? I don't hear any. How about declarations of ex parte contact, conflicts of interest, bias, etc.? I'm going to declare, just in case, an ex parte contact. I went to a lot of the Planning Commission meetings over the last couple of years regarding the item that's the public hearing tonight, the property annexation on Fern Ridge into the city limits. So I went to those meetings, sometimes made comments, sometimes didn't, but I was there, so for what it's worth. Anyone else?
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to declare that I have talked to quite a few community members about their opposition to one of the topics that we're going to be talking about tonight, but it will not influence my decision on like before I make it. So,
Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Brian Quigley on the 24th of February expressed opposition to this ordinance. I also attended the Planning Commission meeting on January 27th. This will not impact my decision.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I've had several community members reach out to me. One of them sent me a letter, and I asked her to forward it on to the city so that everyone could have it. I asked anyone who wanted to talk to me about it to wait till the council meeting.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I live in the neighboring neighborhood. I live in one of the adjacent neighborhoods, and I've also had some people reach out to me, but I come in tonight open-minded and unbiased.
Okay. So here we are, clean as the driven snow, and ready to go. Okay, thanks. There are no appointments this evening. Under public comments, I've got a couple of sets of these. Let's start. Bill Martinek, for Phillips Estates, or at least that's what he might want to talk about. Bill, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. Yes, I'm Bill Martinek, and I reside at 15556 Coon Hollow Road, Stayton, Oregon. And what I wanted to talk about tonight was Phillips Estates storm system. So I put together some printed information here because I really wouldn't have time to go through all of it in 3 minutes. So basically in July of last year, on the 25th, under community comments, there was a lengthy posting about the Phillips Estates, and part of it actually reached out to my family LLC to provide a proposal for solving the stormwater problem out there. So my wife and I met with city staff on August 21st, and we outlined a proposal there. Then on December 4th, I believe, we received a memorandum from city staff that basically rejected our proposal. So since then, I've asked for and received part of the file for that supports the memorandum that we received back. So I just have a couple of questions tonight. One is, out of the 38 pages in the file, we only received 20 of the pages, and the other 18 were withheld under ORS 40.225. And so my question is, we didn't raise any legal issues at our meeting, and not really any legal issues raised in the memorandum, so just was wondering why almost half of the file has been redacted. And the other question I had was just what the process would be to appeal that staff decision back to the city council to make a full presentation to you over our proposal in the future.
I guess I'm supposed to know an answer to that question, Bill.
Well, I have...
And no, really, I should.
there's
But I'm going to refer it to either Keith or our engineer.
I guess I'll be happy to answer. I mean, what Bill's referring to is attorney-client privileged information. That is part of what can be based off of open records requests. Things that aren't discoverable, we have notified Bill of that. This is part of the work that we do, and it's important that we keep that privilege protected,
Okay.
and not open it up to that. We were in a lawsuit with Mr. Martinak. He's well aware of those privileges. That's part of the concern staff would have, as well as the legal matters and ongoing legal issues that potentially could arise from that. So we provide the information, and that's really it. The appeal would not happen to the governing body. He can appeal it to the Attorney General, I believe, is the right person. I could verify that and get back in touch with you to appeal open records request.
Okay. Does that help?
Well, normally under a under a request like that, where that ORS statute is cited, normally we would at least be given some information about what it is that's being withheld. And again, we didn't raise any legal issues in either our proposal or any of our meetings, so just doesn't make sense that half of the file is made up of items that can't be disclosed to us.
Yeah, see, I think Keith tried to give you an answer on that, Bill,
Okay.
with where to
And
appeal
then
that.
the second question was concerning appealing the denial of the proposal to the council and the process that we would go through to do that.
I don't think this would be something that necessarily would be appealed to the council on this type of decision. It's something that we work with staff and legal counsel to respond to. I'd be happy to talk to the city attorney about this and look at the best course forward. But my advice, not being a city attorney, but with that in consideration, is that wouldn't be an appeal that he would make to the city council.
Okay. We can get an answer to that, though, and
Sure.
get back. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
so there was, I did make some copies of some of the pertinent information, and I made enough copies for the council, and I think there might be one extra there. So
Okay.
would you like me to give that to you then?
Maybe give them to Alyssa and let her pass them out to
Okay.
us here in a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. And thank you, Bill. Steve Poisson? We're moving right along here, sort of.
My name is Steve Poisson. I live at 1750 East Pine Street, and I am president of Revitalize Downtown Stayton. I'm here this evening happy to inform you that RDS and Stayton have been chosen by the Oregon Main Street program to be one of two cities that will be part of a pilot program for training on economic vitality that's going to be provided by the Rural Development Initiative. We will host other cities in the area, and it will be a 4-month training program that will happen for Main Street programs. They will cover things such as business engagement, place-based economy building, supporting entrepreneurs and innovation, and economic development incentives and funding assistance. So not only will we have a chance to learn about some of these things along with some of the other Main Street programs, but because we're the pilot city, we will get consultation with the group afterwards in terms of making a plan for our city and setting goals and following through with that. So it's a good thing for Stayton and a good thing for RDS.
Steve, who else, one other city got this pilot program? Who else?
Coos Bay.
Coos Bay, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're the valley and they're the coast.
Okay.
Steve,
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask Steve a question?
I guess, quick.
Steve, can I ask you a question? Sure. You can. Thank you for that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you, so does the Main Street program, so will they look at like our economic development, like the whole city as a master plan, and not necessarily as a whole, but will they take that information to look at when they're looking at, you know, our downtown specifically, but will they take that information into account?
Well, obviously their focus is on the Main Street area, since that's who's putting on the training and has developed the program. But I'll be sure to bring that to them when it comes time to look at specifics for our city.
Just to make sure that it's cohesive,
And to let them know that the that consultant did make some good recommendations about the downtown area.
I love that. Thank you. That's
You're
awesome.
welcome.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Aaron Frichtel. Aaron?
Aaron Frichtel, 12326 Golf Lane, Sublimity. I just have a brief comment or a concern. I'm really pleased to see this up here on the screen and that we're going to have a presentation on that. The ball is rolling, I guess, for Salem to be kind of showing the homeless population that they're not really that welcome with their new statutes that they've been passing. And it's really a concern that we don't have an open door policy here for them to come in droves here. And I'm really concerned about that because of all the ancillary effects that can happen from that, whether it be increased drug use or crime, those kinds of things. And I'm a firm believer in the helping the hand up. And that's what I'm all about. And I'm speaking as a private citizen, that I'm just concerned that if we don't have a plan in place, that it opens the door for them to come here and cause a nuisance. And we don't want that to happen. So we like to help people, but not have a nuisance. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This is at least the second or third meeting, Aaron, where those concerns have been expressed, and so it's, yeah, well taken. I had a chance for some strange reason to be in downtown Salem this afternoon, and that's impressive. And I mean, just the amount of stuff on those sidewalks down by Salem Center.
I want that here.
Wow. Okay. Let's see. There'll be other public comments and chances for them. So, but let's move along. Consent agenda for tonight. If everyone has had a chance to look at that, could we get some action on that, and so we can go to a presentation? Someone?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as approved, as reviewed, as...
Okay. And it's
Good Lord. It's been a long week already.
as presented.
As presented, thank you.
Okay. Motion to approve the consent agenda, which was basically February 18th of this year, city council minutes. Was there a second, please?
Second.
Second, thank you. A motion and a second. Would everyone in favor please say aye?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed, same sign. Hearing none, we'll declare it Motion passed 5-0.
I'm abstaining. I wasn't here, so I'm going to abstain.
You weren't here. Okay. Now, how could we have missed you? So 4-0. Thank you. And one.
I don't
All
know
right,
how.
or 4-1. How about that? Is that
No.
better?
No.
Okay.
1 abstain.
4-0. Okay. Some of us voted in favor. Let's leave it at that. Okay.
No one opposed.
General business, Marion County Tobacco and Substance Abuse presentation. Marion County by Susan McLaughlin. And welcome, and thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. It's exciting for me to be able to be here with you tonight. I've worked for Marion County Health Department for about 15 years, and I actually live up the canyon, and this is one of the first times I've actually got to end my day closer to my home, so it's a real delight to be here. I'm going to talk just for 10 or 15 minutes. This is not intended to solve the problems of Stayton or anywhere else tonight, but really to let you and anybody here tonight understand what we do at Marion County for substance abuse prevention, tobacco prevention, that sort of thing, and invite you to participate with us and see how we can collaborate with you. So, 2019 has come and gone, but during that year we've been very busy at the county. We have completed a whole lot of assessment, and when we look at the way that we do business, our best practice, research-based, evidence-based stuff is that we're doing community work that starts with assessment. So we have done a whole lot of that, and I'm just going to share a few things about what we have found out around my specialty, my program, which is substance abuse in the county. We did start as a county, two-county region, though, completing our CHA, or the Community Health Assessment. These are required by statute for each hospital system, as well as for the county, and for our CCO, which is the Medicaid coordinator right now. So we all partnered together and looked at hundreds of health indicators for our community and came up with this really large document that's about 500 pages long. But it's really looking at all of the health indicators. So that happened. I'll tell you a little bit about the priorities that came out of that. The substance abuse prevention team partnered with about 100 stakeholders from throughout Marion County, including a few people from this area. And we all came together and looked at a deep dive at substance use in Marion County. We focused on not just Salem, but Woodburn, the Stayton Sublimity area, Jefferson, Salem-Kaiser, and the fifth one's not coming to me, but it will. Oh, Silverton, sorry. I always try to leave Silverton out. Poor Silverton. Anyway, we focused on that and did a really community-specific local look at substance use and what's still going on in our county. And then finally, the state conducted with our tobacco and alcohol retail group here an assessment of what's really still going on in tobacco and alcohol retailers. And so we did some funded work around that, and I'll tell you just a few things we found there. And again, my goal is just to share what we learned and what we have available to work with you here in Stayton to bring some data and resources to help you solve whatever problems are important to this community. So I told you that we started out with this very large two-county, once every 5 years assessment with 3 hospital systems and ourselves at the helm. At the end of it, the group that was working on the data, the priority areas that have been selected to focus on for the next 5-year plan across the county is behavioral health supports, housing, which I heard some concerns here tonight, and substance use, which I also heard some concerns about. I'm very proud of that work because this is the first time in the 15 years that I've been with Marion County that substance abuse was seen as a public health issue. Okay, in the past it's been things like diabetes or more of the chronic illnesses. But when we look across the board, really look at our data and what is impacting all of our health indicators, those substance use issues rise to the top across many of them. So what comes out of the CHA, or that large assessment, is some groups that I'll invite you to participate in. We have what's called the Community Health Improvement Plan, or the CHIP. We like acronyms in public health. And that's where community partners across all of our health system, which includes city councils, come together to work on addressing some of those priority areas. So by setting one focus, working together collaboratively in our communities with our local data, we can have a greater impact than just setting policy at the county level. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we have 3 groups forming. They'll be coming along in June. One group will be a subgroup dealing with behavioral health supports, one housing, one substance use, and we're really excited that we're going to actually have a full-time FTE coordinating these efforts and working with communities. So if you're interested in participating in that, we'd love to have you. Our deeper dive in my team, when we looked at what are those substance use issues, we started out with about 100 indicators, looked at data, had a community data work group from all over the county looking at it, assessing it, analyzing what was going on. And the conclusion after about 9 months of work was that alcohol is still the substance that causes the most devastating impact across the board, across our county. Specifically, underage drinking is still of concern. Our underage drinking rates have been falling since the late 80s, and they're continuing to go in that direction, and we're really proud of that. That's a lot of work going on there, but there's still room for more growth there. Young adult high-risk drinking is something we're trying to figure out how to address a little bit better. That's the one place where we don't have great data. It is really hard to measure what's going on with 18 to 25-year-olds. We have 2 university systems in Marion County, Corbin and Willamette, and they have some data because they participate in some college stuff. But their populations are not your everyday 18 to 25-year-old that might be at community college or might just be choosing to go to work at that point. But we do know that the behaviors around drinking and marijuana use and substance use, that they are establishing as patterns in that young adult time. Their brains are still growing, but those are the behavioral patterns that over time also start to impact in their 40s, 50s, 60s, that chronic health component. Substance use exacerbates or contributes to many of our chronic health conditions that older adults experience. So we're concerned about our young adults. DUIs, driving under the influence, also is on the increase in this county, so we want to look at that. And then marijuana was kind of the secondary component. It is legal now, and with that has come a extreme change in our social norms around marijuana. If you'd had asked young people 5 years ago even, if I use marijuana every day, is there a risk to me, to my health, or for getting in trouble? They would have told you, about 85% of them, yeah, I could get in trouble, or there could be a health risk. The most recent survey data we have for 11th graders, it's more like 30% identify that daily use of marijuana products is risky to them or could cause a health issue. So when we believe those things, use tends to go up. So we're concerned there. The area where we have seen the largest increase in marijuana use, almost double the rates in the last couple of years, has been in that 18 to 25-year-old category again. Not so much the high school age use like we are worried, but that next stepping stone of young adulthood. And then the new thing coming up, of course, is vaping and e-cigarettes. And how many of you in here are concerned with vaping? How many have had an impact from vaping? Everywhere I go, that's the number one thing law enforcement's talking to me about, school officials are talking to me about, business people are talking to me about. So vaping will be something that we'll also be working on. And then I told you that we looked a little bit about retailers. There's quite a bit of ambivalence around tobacco and alcohol sales. 20 years ago in my career, it was all about advertising and keeping them away from kids and worrying about flavors. But we've seen a real backslide there in some ways. Some of the things that we know promote alcohol and tobacco to young people are still out there in our communities. So we were able to survey 25% of the alcohol of the tobacco retailers in Marion County, and that was about 54 shops. And we physically went in there with our clipboards and did an inventory, what we saw, what was going on, how they were selling things. 100% of the retailers that were selling tobacco allowed young people underage in their shop, so kids are exposed, right? They see people buying, look behind the counter, they can see that. 7 in 10 of those retailers advertise tobacco or e-cigarettes outside their store. So even if they're in the car, all they have to do really is pull up to any gas pump, any store really, and that advertising is right there for them. Especially if you look, after I've told you this tonight, when you drive home, notice at the gas station or wherever you stop, the vaping ads and the electronic cigarette ads. The other thing is that they are selling products still 43% within 12 inches of toys, candy, gum, slushies, sodas, ice creams, all those things little kids go into the 7-Eleven style store for. And that's not a mistake. Retailers get paid bonuses if they'll place their products close to those things that little kids might see at eye level or be able to reach for. So we still got some work to do. This is our map where this is how we do our work at the county assessment, build capacity. That's what I'm doing here today a little bit. We've assessed the problems. We know what we need. Now we need community partners to help us and to help us with our plans. Takes everyone from many sectors to really start making these impacts to move the needle. So we are looking at asking people to come on board with us to help us solve some of these problems and to engage with the coalitions out there that we work with, whether that's the CHIP work groups or the Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition. We'd love to have people come to our meetings and take part, or we'd also love to come to you. My biggest goal tonight is to remind you that we are a resource here in the county and we would love to partner. So we can come and bring additional presentations or information. We can hold town halls. We can bring data. We can come and show you what I looked at for a year in the data and bring some highlights for you if you're interested in that. We can help you plan perhaps policies or brainstorm through some of these substance use issues that you see in your community and think about what you can actually do as leadership to help things get healthier in your community. So for additional information, as I said, if you're interested in any kind of substance focus group, we can come and do that. We can bring our ideas back to you after we look at what's going on here, hold a town hall, ask your community members what they think, facilitate some discussions, and help you out if you're interested in that. So the ask I have for you, that's what I have to offer. As much as you'll take me up on it, we'd love to be here. We have a team of 8 people who work on this, and we're out and about all the time. But we would love for you guys to take a survey, and tomorrow you will receive a survey in the email asking you for about 10 minutes of your time. About 5 years ago we did this survey. It's called a Jurisdictional Readiness Survey. And it's going to ask you a few questions about some of the things I've been talking about tonight to try to get an idea what is of concern in Stayton, what is of concern to you folks, what would you like to work on, and then with the findings from that, which will come right back to you, we will make some proposals and see where we can partner. So hopefully you will participate in that survey. Oops, I went too far. And we will be able to partner. So that's really all I wanted to say tonight. I know it's not probably very satisfying as far as a presentation because I heard people saying, I'm glad you're talking tonight. So I'm glad to come back and talk a whole heck of a lot more. So maybe we can connect. But at this time, I'll kind of stop talking and say thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me present and answer any questions that you might have for me.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
We'll get some lights on so we can see.
Oh.
see what the questions are. Ooh, okay.
Mr.
Everybody
Mayor.
has to wake up.
First of all, the way this is structured, is there any public comment? Anyone in the audience that would like to raise a question, or for Susan? Thank you. Susan, this is a time. Aaron?
Can I just say from here?
No, you need to go to
Go on up there.
Uh-oh.
Go on up there and share that with her.
Back to be official.
There we go.
Thank you, Doug.
I'm interested in knowing some of the numbers. From what I understand, that up to 90% of the people that are homeless are experiencing some sort of mental health issues or drug use or something like that. So that seems to be combined with that issue that continues to perpetuate, so.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we can't give a real solid number. A lot of our information there is anecdotal. If we asked your law enforcement person, how many of those are, he'd say most of them or all of them, right? We do know that substance use is involved in an estimated 75% of folks who are experiencing homelessness, and about 80% who are experiencing of homelessness is someone who's had a mental health episode or a mental health experience. But a lot of that's just anecdotal. People who come into shelter, we can get some information about. But in Salem, for example, as someone was commenting, there are quite a few people who are unhoused who are not interested in entering shelter. And we don't collect a whole lot of information from them until maybe they hit the ER or end up in our healthcare system.
Okay, all right. Someone else?
Counselor.
Steve?
I recall that the non-smoking ordinance for the downtown area is still on hold. It's supposed to be reviewed by a committee or something at some point, and I wondered if that's something that this young woman might be able to help us wrestle with and figure out what are some good policies in that area.
Yeah.
Okay. Susan?
I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, we did help with some work 3 or 4 years ago. Does that sound about right, where we were thinking about it? It's been a while. But yes, Margaret wasn't able to be with me tonight for this presentation. She's actually doing this presentation in Mount Angel. But Margaret is a tobacco policy specialist, and we have all kinds of sample policy and some processes to help, for sure, to pass different tobacco-related policies for your city. So yeah, we'd love to help you with that, for sure.
Okay, all right, thank you. Someone else? Anyone? Okay, how about council discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Questions from counselors? Go ahead.
Yeah. I have a question about the co-occurring disorders, like if they have substance use and mental health disorders. Do you have a number of what percentage those co-occur?
No, but it's pretty high. Yeah.
Okay.
We can estimate those things of people who've entered treatment, but we can't estimate that for people who've never been in treatment or who maybe are heavy drinkers or have some mental illness, but they go to their regular physician and they also drink too much, they're self-medicating at night. So really the estimates are pretty high. I think when I see literature around it, it's 65-75% is where the estimates lie as far as one and the other. They don't cause each other, but they definitely go hand in hand. The risk factors for mental health and the risk factors for substance use often begin with a root cause that is the same. So.
And when are the meetings that you guys are having for this Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition and the CHIP meetings?
Okay. We have a meeting at the end of the month for the Coalition for Substance Use, and I can get those dates back to you. I want to say it's the final Thursday, which might be the 26th or something like that, and it will be in the afternoon in Salem. The steering committee for the CHIP work groups is meeting a couple of times this month to get some structure in place, and we'll have a kickoff event sometime in June.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll make sure
Mr.
we'll
Mayor.
contact you with those.
Chris, go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation.
You bet.
How do our numbers compare with other likewise counties and across the state? Are they seeing similar numbers?
It would depend which, the county? How is the county compared to the state?
like the increase in the social norms of marijuana usage and with 11th graders, those kinds of stats.
Stayton School District, the school district here, doesn't participate in the school survey, so I don't have Stayton-specific data for you. That's somewhat unfortunate. Maybe we can get them back on board with the student wellness survey that's coming around here pretty soon. However, in general, in Marion County, school by school, there are some schools that are doing much better than the state average. There are some schools that are not doing so well compared to the state average. As a county as a whole, when we aggregate all that data and include in Salem, we are usually a little bit better as far as our youth. Our DUIs are worse than the state average. I'm trying to pull a few things out of my head. If you're really interested in that kind of a data presentation, that's the kind of thing I like to put together.
Okay.
And I could come back with some really concrete numbers, so I'm not just kind of pulling them out of my head.
Thanks.
Because I really didn't want to take up, an hour of your time tonight. But I did want to pique your interest, so I hope I've done that.
Peaked.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Someone else? Go ahead.
I just have one more question. And I'm just wondering the interest of the council of having you guys come back and talk to us, especially about some of the substance use issues, because we have had a couple of those things pop up around our town, and I think that we have a lot of people that are interested in helping
That would be
those
great.
individuals.
We can involve you in our coalition, but we can also come here and hold a town hall and get a group together and help you facilitate those discussions here that are really specific to Stayton and action in Stayton.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of the mental health, substance abuse, and houselessness, so.
Yeah, well, we'd love to come back, so it's just a matter of figuring out some timing.
Okay.
Yeah, so be in touch.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right. Anyone
Anything else?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you for coming out tonight. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the stats that are here, the retail snapshot. That's really interesting to me. I have a lot of interest in hearing you come back with some statistics, because we're all analytical, as it's been pointed out to me. So
I
if you could
spent a
do
year
that.
looking at data, so that tells you, although we're data-driven, right, we have to be data-driven to
Right.
make those informed choices, but I happen to love it, so
Yeah.
I would love to come back.
And specific focus on, I think Steve Poison touched on a little bit, some of our tobacco use policies downtown. In line with that, maybe some statistics so we can speak with facts at hand at some point later on down the road. That would be fantastic. So thank you so much.
Would love to. All right, so tomorrow you'll get that survey. Fill out your surveys. And then have us back. Thank you so much.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
remembering Stayton's on the map. We appreciate it.
Done? Okay, thank you, Susan.
I'll sneak up here and give this back so I can't
Okay.
accidentally sneak away with it. Thank you for loaning that to me. All right, good night, everybody.
Okay, we'll see, we've got the lights on and the machine is off, and we're going to go to a public hearing. First thing, though, let's see. My friend Mike in the back, can you hear back there okay? Okay, I wanted to make sure, because sometimes we get this, I'm afraid to talk in this thing because they might hear what I'm saying, so got to be careful with that and work at it. Okay. We have a public hearing, and I'm going to read a script, which many of you have heard many times before, and probably think by this time he should have this thing memorized, but he doesn't. So I'm going to read this before we start. Good evening, my name is Henry Porter. I'm the mayor of Stayton, and I will be presiding over this hearing. This is the time and place set for the City Council's public hearing in the matter of land use file number 11-07/19, application for annexation of approximately 18 acres of land at 13601 Fern Ridge Road into the city limits. The application requests that the property be zoned medium-density residential. The hearing is now open. Oregon land use law requires a statement be made to those in attendance that covers certain matters relative to this case. That statement, with all the information required to be presented under the Oregon Revised Statute number 197.763 bracket 5, is printed and available on the table at the back of the room. If you have not yet received one of these forms, you should go get one and review it prior to presenting your testimony. If anyone has any questions regarding anything on the statement or objects to it not being read out loud, please raise those questions when it comes to your turn to speak during the hearing. Also at the back counter is the agenda for this evening's meeting, which lays out the order in which people will be called on to speak during the public hearing, the City Council's rules of procedure for land use public hearings, and a brochure written to facilitate your participation in the public hearing. You are encouraged to obtain and read a copy of these documents as well. At this time, I would ask the audience if there are any objections to the notice that was presented in this case. I hear none. to the jurisdiction of this body to hear and consider this case? I hear none. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest, ex parte contact, or bias by any members of the council? And those have already been expressed.
We have to express
Are
Mr.
there
Mayor,
any-
do it again.
Mr. Mayor, those were already expressed, but they were not expressed on the record of this hearing. So I'm afraid that you will need to all eloquently express them again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
I will declare that I've gone to several planning commission meetings where this topic was discussed. I have no voting voice in this, but I was there at those meetings. Counselor?
I have talked to quite a few community members that have opposed this. It will not influence my decision. I will not come to this decision with bias.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I've had several conversations with community members as well and live in an adjacent neighborhood, but I come in open-minded and unbiased tonight.
Okay. Anyone?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
On
David?
February 24th of this year, Brian Quigley contacted me, expressed opposition on this. On January 27th, I attended a planning commission meeting where this topic was discussed. This shall not bias my decision.
Okay, yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Counselor?
I spoke with several individuals in the community and asked them to either come to the meeting or send their written testimony to the city so that everyone has it.
Okay, thank you. Any others? Okay, so, with that being done, we are now ready for the staff introduction. Mr. Fleischman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. The hearing tonight is a hearing on an application to annex land into the city. The property is located on Fern Ridge Road between the Foothills Church and the Boulders Mobile Home Park. As was stated in the mayor's opening statement on the back table, there were, and I don't know, because we have a larger than usual crowd, I don't know whether there are still copies of the information that state law requires be made available to the public at the public hearing. I want to stress a couple of points, mostly for the public, but also for the council. The application tonight is just to annex land into the city. There is not an application to develop the property. Testimony about the impacts of development, such as traffic and stormwater, are not relevant to the application. There are criteria for annexing land into the city, and in order to be relevant, testimony provided by the public at the hearing needs to address the criteria for approval on which the application will be judged. The other important part of what the state law requires to be said at the opening of the hearing is that failure to raise an issue at the hearing precludes anyone from bringing up that issue in any subsequent appeal. Finally, anybody may request the opportunity to present additional testimony or evidence after tonight's proceedings. So with that brief introduction, I'll turn it over to the applicant, and then I'll be back with my staff report.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I'll be back. Applicant presentation. Mr. Grant.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Mark Grenz, and I'm with Multi-Tech Engineering. Our office is at 1155 13th Street Southeast in Salem, and we're representing the property owner and the applicant in this request before you this evening. so as to not have you sit there and wonder what I'm sporting tonight. I'm a new grandpa this weekend, so that's my grandpa button. So, not my first grandchild, but they're all exciting, as those of you that are in my position recognize. We have been working with staff on trying to arrive at getting this property annexed and coming at it from the standpoint of being able to have a development proposal that would fit some of the unique characteristics of this particular site. And I prepared this slide that I had Dan put up so that you could see. This property is 19 acres, but there are a few impediments to the ability to develop this property in a normal fashion, with the fact that we butt up against the Highway 22 and into your parks master plan. There's the requirement for a linear park of some sort. It's not clearly identified what that would be, but there would need to be some kind of a linear park or feature that exists along the highway, and that's that area that I've shown up at the top there. Lucas Ditch runs through here, and there's a natural resource, an open space requirement in your development code that talks about what can and can't happen in that. So that's 100 feet each side of Lucas Ditch, so there's a 200-foot swath in there which there can't be any structures placed. There is also an existing small waterway that picks up drainage from Fern Ridge and from the other side of Fern Ridge that transfers that water through and outlets it into Lucas Ditch. And under your development code, that I can't mitigate and relocate that. So those are the impediments. All total, those impediments, not counting this little drainage way, are just over 5 acres of the 19 acres are impeded from being able to have residential structures of any type located in them. So, as you could probably presume from this, the prospect of trying to do some type of low-density residential development on here with 10,000 square foot lots just wouldn't be able to be anywhere close to efficient. Your average for single-family residential in the low-density zone is densities that are approach 3 or less units per acre. I doubt that we'd be able to achieve that, in the overall density in this site. So we originally, if you read in the staff report, we originally came to the city. We talked about putting a commercial zone in here that would allow us to do a RV park type development, and again trying to find a way to provide a variety of a housing type to your market here that you don't have. But there were some things that the criteria in the code that talked about that being able to do that made it impossible to achieve because we didn't have the correct connection to the highway and interchange that required. So we stepped back, took another look at this and said, okay, another type of housing that we could bring into the community here would be a manufactured home park. You got a manufactured home park that was developed several years ago that sits to the east of us, and then of course the church. Then you got medium density residential zone property to the west that has more conventional single family type development in it. At the Planning Commission hearing, during the public presentation there, Jerry Aboud presented a suggestion to the Planning Commission that some of this property, if not all this property, should be considered for high density residential. We had not considered that approach to this property, but since that time, our client has given that approach to this property, and with some serious consideration, and that we think that would afford us a better opportunity to create affordable housing for your community, increase your density goals, what you're trying to achieve in order to meet those things that LCD has set out for you, and allow us to better create buffers from the waterways and the highway from that. So, as you probably surmise where I'm headed here this evening, our request for you tonight would be for you to annex this property, and we would ask that you would designate this property as high-density residential. We think that would be more fitting for your community. Clearly, there has been a fair number of people have expressed their desire not to have a manufactured home park in this area, so that does make one of our goals a little bit harder to achieve. The part of the application and this process relative to annexation, the staff report, and staff's done a great job of outlining how the property meets the criteria and is justified in being annexed to your community, and that it would come and that being annexed as residential zone. That's fitting. So my point this evening is to point out to you that we think that high density residential is probably going to be a zone that better fits, allows us to make a more efficient use of the property, and I think would allow us to have a better opportunity to stay away from the natural features that are there. I think that's probably a good place to stop and ask if you had questions of us, because like I said, the rest of the application relative to the annexation itself is pretty straightforward.
Okay. Mark, we've got another part of the staff report and then council questions. So let's come back, let's save those and come back to you in just a few minutes. Is that okay?
You betcha. Thank you very much.
It has to be, because that's the way this is written up. Ben? Mr. Fleischman.
Good, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've got a few slides to go. You know what? I won't be able to read my staff report.
You haven't memorized?
It's one or the other.
Not
right?
all 14 pages of it I haven't memorized. So I've got a few slides to go along with my staff report to walk you through the process. So as I said in my introduction, what you've got before you is an application for annexation. You've got two decisions to make. One is, are the criteria for approval of annexing land into the city met? And if so, then what zone to apply to the property? This is the subject property. Mr. Grenz showed you the sort of the limitations placed upon it by our plans and codes. Our Parks and Recreation Master Plan calls for a linear park to eventually be running along the south side of Highway 22. It calls for a 200-foot wide natural resource overlay district to be along Lucas Ditch, and our local wetlands inventory that was done in the mid-1990s shows that there's two significant wetlands, one along Lucas Ditch, the other the drainage area that leads to Lucas Ditch from Fern Ridge Road, and our code prohibits pretty much any development activity within those significant wetlands. The land use code establishes 6 criteria for approval of an application for annexation, and it is the applicant's responsibility to present information and evidence to you as the decision maker as to whether those criteria have been met or not. Those criteria are that there is the need for land to be annexed into the city, that the site is capable of being serviced by adequate city public services, including services that might be provided subject to the terms of a contract annexation. The applicant has not proposed a contract annexation in this case. That the proposed annexation is property that is contiguous to the existing city jurisdictional limits. That the proposed annexation is compatible with the character of the surrounding area and complies with the city's urban growth program and policies. And finally, and I did not, that it complies with all applicable provisions of state and local law. There is actually a sixth criteria that deals exclusively with contract annexations, and because this is not a contract annexation, it is not relevant. Of the 5 criteria that are relevant, and I've got them in 6 bullet points here, of the 5 criteria that are relevant, 3 of them are fairly objective and leave little for interpretation or discretion by the council. However, 2 of them are very subjective and leave you, I believe, quite a bit of latitude in how you interpret them and how you apply the facts and information that is presented to you to determine whether those criteria are met or not. The criteria regarding availability of city utility services, of contiguous with the city limits, and compliance with state and local law are objective criteria. In this case, the property is contiguous to the city limits on 3 sides. There are sewer and water mains in Fern Ridge Road, adjacent to the property or recently installed by the city on the property. And the provisions of state law, I'll go into in a little bit more detail later on some of them, but basically require the owners of the land to consent to its annexation, or we have to send it out to be voted on by the residents of the property, of which there are none. But in this case, we've gotten the consent of all of the owners of the property. So the 2 other criteria that are really up to you to analyze and scrutinize are the need for this property to be annexed into the city and its compatibility with the character of the surrounding area. You've got in my written staff report some analysis about need that I've presented to you. The code is pretty quiet as to what need means. It leaves it to your discretion to determine whether we need this land to be added to the city or not. The way I look at it, we've got an adopted comprehensive plan by your predecessors in 2013 that included what's called a buildable lands inventory. And at that time, our comprehensive plan stated that to meet the expected population growth and housing needs of the city, that the city was going to need to annex an additional 320 acres of residential land over the 20-year planning period following its adoption in 2013. Since that time, the city has annexed approximately 38 acres of land for residential use. At the time the buildable lands inventory was written, there were 114 lots comprising 106 acres of land that were vacant inside the city limits and zoned for residential use. Today, there are 81 vacant lots totaling 110 acres within the city limits. We've had one subdivision platted in the past 5 years. 2 subdivisions have been platted in the past 10 years. They total 50 lots. And as of today, on those 50 lots, there are 46 homes and 26 vacant lots. There is the Lambert Place subdivision that is currently under construction, but not yet platted. There is the Virginia Street Terrace subdivision with 4 lots, not yet, that's been approved, but construction has not started. And that would be 4 lots. So we expect that the Lambert Place subdivision will be platted this spring or early summer. We expect the Virginia Terrace subdivision to start construction this summer, but we're not there yet, we don't know. Today, like I said, there's 81 parcels totaling 110 acres of land. However, when you look at what is reasonably available for development, there's probably only 74 parcels totaling 60 acres of land. The 7 parcels that take up about 50 acres of land have not been included in that because either there's not utility service reasonably available to them, there are substantial wetlands and floodplain issues on them, or they are owned by a governmental agency and not likely to be made available to a private developer. If you look at the city's growth for the past 20 years, we have grown at an average annual rate of about 0.8%. We've grown in population between 2000 and 2019 by 1,054 people. The county's coordinated growth projection assumes a 1.6% growth. Average annual 1.6% growth. At that growth rate, from the most recent certified population estimate of the city, we would need an additional 495 new dwelling units over the next 10 years, an average of about 50 per year. If we had an average of 4 units per acre in single-family development, we would need all of the vacant land in the city and an additional 40 acres of land in order to accommodate the projected 500 new homes. That's my assessment of whether the city needs to annex additional residential land or not. We'll get there. The second criterion that you need to decide whether it is met or not is whether the property is compatible with the character of the surrounding area. The comprehensive plan designates the area as residential. All of the yellow in this map is residential. The green is public land. The whatever color that is, pinkish mauve, is commercial. Here's just a blow-up of that area. And the surrounding property is on the east side, is zoned medium-density residential, was developed about 25 years ago as a mobile home park. To the south, across Fern Ridge Road, is all single-family detached residential. To the immediate west of this property is the Foothills Church, which is zoned public, and to the west of that is medium-density residential single-family development. At the time my staff report was written, The request before the council was to zone this medium density. Now looking at a request to zone it as high-density residential. If you find that the criteria for approval of an annexation are met, your next decision is which zone to apply. The applicant has now requested that you apply high-density residential. Just so you understand what that means, the only housing type that is permitted in high-density residential is multifamily. The code requires a minimum of 13 units per acre. So I did some math quickly, and if I did this right, 19 acres of land at 13 units per acre is about 250 apartments. If you zone it medium density, the code allows single family, 2-family, and 3-family buildings, but does not allow multifamily buildings. It requires a minimum lot size for a single-family home or a duplex of 7,000 square feet, which works out to be about 5 to 5.5 units per acre by the time you create a 7,000 square foot lot and 60-foot wide streets between them. And requires a minimum lot size of 10,500 for a 3-unit building. If you were to zone it low-density residential, east of 10th Avenue, the code requires a 10,000 square foot minimum lot size, which works out to about 3 units per acre. Finally, I've noted in my staff report, you've got more information on this. The Marion County Comprehensive Plan contains what's called an urban growth strategy for the county's cities. It establishes for the cities in the county various residential density guidelines. There are 3 different guidelines depending on the population size of the city. Cities with a population of less than 5,000 have a less dense requirement. Cities with a population of more than, I think it's 20,000, have a more dense requirement. And those like Stayton, the guideline is between 5 and 6 units per gross acre of land that is zoned residential. I've done some analysis of where the city stands, and if you look at all of our residential land that is zoned, all of the land in the city that is zoned residential, we are currently at, where's my number here? We are currently at about 3.5 units per acre. If you look at the residential development that has taken place, all of the subdivisions that have been platted since the year 2000, we have developed about 145 acres of land for 423 housing units, which it comes out to about 3.0 units per acre. So choosing to zone this medium density or high density would help the city meet the density guideline that the Marion County Comprehensive Plan has set. Finally, our city charter and our city code require any annexation of more than 1 acre to be sent to the voters for approval. However, in 2016, the legislature enacted Chapter 51 of the Oregon Laws of 2016, which essentially says if you find that the criteria for approval are met for land that is in our urban growth boundary and contiguous to our city limits, then you are prohibited from sending this to the voters, and you are given the responsibility, authority to make the final decision. You have got before you a draft of Ordinance 1043, which, as written, would assign medium-density residential zoning to the property. The staff report provides you with a number of options to assign any of the 3 residential zones to it, or to deny the application would be another option before you and find that the criteria for approval are not met. So with that, I'll wrap up my presentation and be available to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. As we go to questions from the council, let me start off by asking, in this numbers game, we've got 250 apartments, more or less, in this HD zone. How many in the MD? What's the maximum density we could do there?
Well, what the code says is that the maximum density in the medium density zone is 12 units per acre.
Okay, so...
However, if you're laying out even duplex lots, you're not going to be able to achieve 12 units per acre.
Okay. So
even if you had a 7,000 square foot lot with a duplex on it with 70 feet of frontage, if you had a 70 by 100 lot with a 60-foot road and another 70 by 100 lot on the other side of it, and you had a duplex on every lot, you'd end up with about 6.5 to 7 units per acre.
Okay. Do the math quick and get me a total.
So let's call it 7.
Let's call it 7. Good.
7 times 19 is...
I never could do those odd numbers.
133.
133. Okay. That's good. How about LD?
LD, again, the code talks about a limit of 6 units per acre.
Okay.
But if you had a 10,000 square foot lot with 80 feet of frontage, and again a 60-foot road, you'd end up with about 2 and probably about 3 units per acre.
Okay,
so 3 times 19 is 57.
57. Okay. All right. Good. Somebody else? Questions from the council?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I have a question for the applicant.
Okay. Mr. Grenz.
So the whole 19 acres isn't buildable, correct?
That's correct.
And so you were talking about with your medium density that you would only be building on 5 acres.
No, there's 5 acres that cannot have.
Oh, that cannot. Okay.
So that's what's represented by your natural resource zone and my projection of what I think a linear park along the highway might be.
Okay, I misunderstood
That's just my projection, but.
So Keith, that's where you got the 14. Okay. That's all I had for you. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for the applicant.
Somebody else?
Yeah. You had mentioned something about affordable housing. If this was to be high density, can you just kind of, I'm curious what you meant, because we couldn't ask questions during your introduction.
So there's terminology that is used in the land development world. Affordable is, you hear that a lot in what's being presented. Affordable just means that you're providing housing of a nature that more people can afford to live in than could in a more conventional upper or mid-range single-family style house would be. So I'm not familiar with the prices here in town right now because I haven't done that much here in town. But in Salem, for instance, what would be considered an affordable house, a single-family house, would be something that's built that the retail price is below $300,000. That's what would be considered affordable today. And then you have housing that's being created in Salem that runs all the way up into well over $500,000. So that's the range. So multifamily or manufactured home parks offer another avenue for people to be able to get into a residence that's more affordable than trying to buy a single-family house, for instance. So affordable doesn't mean low income. Affordable doesn't mean income subsidized. It's affordable just simply means something that's more reachable by a larger majority of the population than that which would be median or upper end housing types.
Okay.
Would you say more
Thank you. Other
workforce
questions?
housing?
Go ahead, Councilor.
Would you say more workforce housing, things that the workers in our area might be able to afford?
Yeah, generally, all communities are desperately in need of housing that falls below that 300
Certainly.
cap. Manufactured, well, I haven't done much manufactured home work in the recent, but I do a lot of apartment design work, and that is considered to be more workforce oriented, although that's not just workforce people choose to live in apartments, other people choose to live in apartments, but that would be in that category. So
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
This question is for Dan. Now that we have a change in what the applicant is requesting as far as zoning goes for this application, does this now need to rework itself through the process of going through the Planning Commission and being vetted out for that high-density zoning?
I don't think it needs to go back to the Planning Commission. They made their recommendation partly based upon what was asked of them, but it is ultimately your decision as to which zone to apply, regardless of the Planning Commission's recommendation.
I realize that, but now that there's been a modification to the application, that way the public has the chance to go to Planning Commission meetings and speak about it and work through the process.
That certainly would be, with this change, that would be an option that's available to the council to say, hey, applicant, go back to the Planning Commission. With their application, they submitted a conceptual plan. We have not seen a conceptual plan of what developing this property under high-density zoning would look like. So that again, that would be an option available to the council to remand isn't really the right word, but
right.
To send it back to the council, to the Planning Commission for that type of consideration.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to say, not that would, I don't mean to impede upon the applicant, but the citizens of this city deserve the right to speak during the process as the application is in its current form. So the current form of the application, working its way through the Planning Commission, would give a satisfactory opportunity for citizens to speak, correct? I mean, now that we have a difference, maybe people might be here who wouldn't have otherwise been here had this been a high-density proposed zoning. That's my thought on this.
Mr. Mayor?
Question.
Okay, other questions?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
This question is for Dan, and I'm not sure if you know the answer, but the last time that I checked, our median household income was $42,000 in Stayton. Do you happen to know if that is still true? Do you work with that kind of data with your mapping stuff?
Not with the mapping stuff. I think it's a little bit higher than that. I think it's closer to 50.
Okay.
For a median household income.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
All right. Ben? Counselor?
As far as I know, Dan, my general knowledge says that you want to have a good mix of different residential zones in a city. My question is, are there or is there a possibility of other properties that could potentially be high density, or would this be the only opportunity in our vision right now for that kind of thing? I know there's not a ton of high density in the town right now. Is there anything in the pipeline? Is there any other properties that might come down the road that we would have the ability to zone high density if that need arose, or is this our best opportunity?
There is currently, in the city limits, one vacant parcel zoned high density. It is the property between Cascade Highway and 3rd Avenue, south of the assisted living facility. It is about 4 acres. It has been on the market for about 5 years. No one has yet to come forward with that. There is very little other land in the city limits today that is zoned residential, that is vacant, that would be, in my mind, appropriate for high density. I can think of 2 parcels. One is a vacant parcel on Gardner Ave next to the high school baseball field. It's kind of behind the house, back before the Great Recession, I guess we call it. It was approved to be I believe, 14-unit duplex development, and the developer never went through with it. Their approvals expired. It is zoned medium density today, but that would be a reasonable parcel, in my mind, to be zoned high density and have some apartments on it. There is a little bit of high density residential land west of 1st Avenue, south of Ida Street, behind the little shopping center with the Stop and Shop and Cheers on 1st, etc. It's been zoned high density forever, but it's got like a single family house on it, so it's not real vacant land, but it's there. I've had conversation, that property recently sold. I've had conversations with the new owner, and we may actually be seeing an application for a comprehensive plan amendment from residential to commercial. Finally, there is a 9-acre parcel not in the city today that is designated by our comprehensive plan as commercial, for which we've had a pre-application meeting with the new owner. And it's my understanding that they intend to submit an application to annex that property and to change the comprehensive plan designation on half of it from commercial to residential and ask for high density with the intention of building multifamily.
Half of 9 acres.
Yeah, on half, right, on half of the 9 to 10 acres.
Okay.
So on 4 to 5 acres, so 4 to 5 acres at 13 units per acre would be a minimum of about 60 units.
Okay, thank you. One other thing I wanted to say to the council mostly was that in my research from other cities across the country, the kind of the general goal, and maybe Dan, you can correct me on this if I misread something, is affordable housing has kind of a generic description of affordable for somebody at 70% of median income for that area. So that's just some fact that I found that if you want to use a metric for that, then maybe you've heard otherwise, but that's what I found in multiple places, about 70% of median.
Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Yes.
So on my phone, I looked up, I think at one time your number was right, 43,000. And the most recent data seems to indicate from 2019 that 50,000 would be about median. But I was saying the same thing you were. There's some information, I think that's about 2015. So the most recent data would support what Dan had said and what the estimate is for median income housing in the state. Just want to share that.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Aren't there some numbers out there that suggest that affordable housing, you figure it becomes a percentage of family or personal family income?
So,
no more than 30 or 40 or?
If that's a question to me.
That's what these numbers are.
Housing experts, of which I won't necessarily include myself, consider housing to be affordable if the consumer of that housing is not spending more than 30% of their
30%,
income
okay.
towards housing, which includes, in the case of ownership, mortgage principal and interest, taxes, and insurance. So it's not just your monthly mortgage bill.
Okay.
And for rental, it is also, I've seen some people who include rent and utilities included in that 30% figure. So then the second part of that, so that's sort of what defines something as affordable, is then affordable to whom?
There you go. Okay.
You know, Bill Gates can afford a lot more housing than I can. So most public target programs that I've seen are for what I will call reserved affordable housing, are targeting a population with an income of 80% of the area median or less. So 50, 80%, so that would be, in Stayton's case, that would be a household income of about $40,000 a year would be your target population for reserved affordable housing.
Okay, all right. Let's try to move along here. It's 8:30.
Mr. Mayor.
We've got some more questions.
Yep.
And apparently they do. We still need to get to proponents and the audience participating in this. So go ahead, Counselor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Dan, we got a lot of people talking about a homeless issue, and is it true that we haven't had affordable or any multifamily housing built since 2002? Is that still the case?
We have had one building of 4 units
Okay.
built in this city as the only multifamily housing since 2002.
And a follow-up, please, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Can I do a follow-up question?
One. Others want to speak, so go
Okay.
ahead. One.
Thanks. Is this something that, is affordable housing something that we could define in code?
Definitely. But so far in past discussions, previous councils have chosen not to do so.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Jordan?
I have a question about the 5 criteria. Hold on. Sorry, I'm on the wrong page. On the 5 criteria, so on B, when we're talking about, sorry, where'd it go? You know which one I'm talking about?
I know which one you're talking about.
Okay, so, oh, there it is. So the site is or capable of being serviced by adequate public services, including, okay, public services. So in my mind, if we're talking about medium or high density, we know that that road has some traffic issues. And so are there going to be proper traffic control devices for medium or high density there coming off of Fern Ridge? And I feel like that's applicable to this situation. That's a public
and city service.
At the time that this applicant or some subsequent applicant comes forward with a development proposal, they will be required to submit a transportation impact analysis. As was noted in the staff report, it's already been mentioned to them and is in the record that they will need to do full frontage improvements of Fern Ridge Road. Fern Ridge Road is not an improved street.
Okay.
Fully improved street. So there will need to be full frontage improvements to the standards for its appropriate functional classification. And whether additional traffic control is required will be part of the development review process at such time as someone comes forward to develop the property.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I have another question.
Okay, quickly.
So this might be in the same area, but I feel like it still is under adequate public services. Questions were raised about the stormwater runoff. And you said at the beginning that that's not really applicable, but I still feel like that's applicable because each time we add something on, we kind of had this issue when we were talking about another annexing property, and I feel like this is something that needs to be thought about and addressed, with annexing this in, if these services are going to be adequate and if this is going to be addressed.
It will, again, when someone comes forward with a development proposal, we require that they submit a stormwater management plan that demonstrates that the stormwater can be handled meeting our Public Works design standards.
Can you remind me, is that something that comes back before us?
It does not routinely come before you.
The Planning Commission?
But it goes to the Planning Commission, but you have the ability for each and every application that goes to the Planning Commission to reach out and take jurisdiction.
Call it up.
Okay.
Okay.
And then it would come before you, or if you're not happy with the Planning Commission's decision, you have the right or the authority to call that decision up.
Okay.
So you can step in even before the Planning Commission hearing and assume jurisdiction if you choose to.
Okay.
Okay, there will be time for more council questions. Let's go to proponents' testimony at this point as the hour wears on us. And does anyone want to speak in favor of this proposal? And if not, does anyone wish to speak against it? Or an opponent?
Mr. Mayor.
Anyone? Please.
Casey Falconer, 810 Sunrise Drive. Originally coming in here tonight, I was not necessarily an opponent of this until I've heard that we've now changed the application once again. I've been to both council meetings, the Planning Commission, and it went from RV Park original, then the next meeting was minimal days beforehand, the public was given information about changing from RV to manufactured